Now, the UK, France and Germany have announced fresh sanctions on Iran for supplying Russia with ballistic missiles for use in Ukraine. Among the new measures which have been announced as the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken visits London are restrictions on Iran Air's ability to fly to the UK and Europe. The Western officials say Iranian missiles have been used to strike civilian targets in Ukraine.
Dozens of Russian military personnel have been trained in Iran to use the Fata 360 close-range ballistic missile system, which has a maximum range of 75 miles. Russia has now received shipments of these ballistic missiles and will likely use them within weeks in Ukraine against Ukrainians. Russia has an array of its own ballistic missiles, but the supply of Iranian missiles enables Russia to use more of its arsenal for targets that are further from the front line, while dedicating the new missiles it's receiving from Iran for closer range targets.
Well, our security correspondent Frank Gardner talked me through how serious this is.
It's public knowledge. Iran doesn't deny it, or at least there's no getting around it. They are massive suppliers of the Shahed family of drones, which Russia tends to use. I mean, they're relatively small, but they're very useful in confusing Ukraine's air defences. But this is a major step up. It's been described by Antony Blinken as a dramatic escalation, because a ballistic missile goes up and down in a parabola like that and packs a pretty big punch, 150 kilos of high explosive. And what this will allow Russia to do is to use Iran's new ballistic missiles that have been shipped clandestinely across the Caspian Sea to hit Ukraine's battle lines, their front lines, and allowing Russia to use its own existing arsenal of longer-range missiles to carry on battering Ukraine's cities like Kyiv, Odessa, Lviv and others. So it's bad news for Ukraine. Dozens, if not hundreds, of Ukrainians will die from this development. And I was at that press conference today, and often, these things tend to be sort of very much about the optics, and they're off to Ukraine, the two of them, Blinken and Lamy, in a sort of joint trip to assess Ukraine's needs and then report back to their respective governments. I think Ukrainians would probably say, guys, that's welcome, but you don't need to come all the way here. We'll tell you what our needs are: air defense and the ability to fire long-range missiles into Russia to hit the bases that are being used to launch the attacks on Ukraine. They didn't really address that big question as to whether Ukraine's going to be allowed to do that. This is the big hot political potato at the moment, because more cautious voices in Washington, particularly Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, is very wary of provoking Russia too much. Other more hawkish voices have said every one of Russia's red lines have turned out to just be nothing. So we should go ahead and allow the Ukrainians to defend themselves as best they can.